Now, this is a very interesting question I've gotten more and more frequently, and that is, should I move to Los Angeles if I'm trying to be a music producer, or especially if you're trying to be a DJ and an electronic artist? So in this video, I'm talking about what is it like to live in LA in terms of the good and the bad. There's a lot of pros, a lot of cons. In addition, moving here specifically related to music production. Now, first off, in case you didn't know, I moved here from Boston, literally cross country. I packed up my car, drove it all the way here. And in terms of moving to LA right off the bat, and you could probably imagine, it's pretty expensive. But in different ways, I find that most cities, I've traveled a lot all around the country, and obviously, as you can imagine, some cities are dirt cheap to live in, and everything's super, super inexpensive, and other cities are a lot more expensive. What I find is that when it comes to LA compared to most cities, it's actually about the same with rent. I mean, I'm used to a pretty high rent, especially living in Boston. So I feel like compared to, let's say, some remote part of the country, LA is gonna be a huge jump. But compared to most cities, I think especially too because LA isn't really a city. I know a lot of people call LA a city. LA, or Los Angeles, in my opinion, refers to the entire group on the map that is a bunch of different cities. Like Santa Monica's LA, there's Hollywood, West Hollywood, Koreatown, downtown LA. Some people consider the Valley, or Reseda, for example, LA. Some people consider Long Beach, or Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach. I could go on and on. There's a bunch of those subsects of LA. And as a result of that, there's different rent prices. So I feel like coming here, rent isn't too bad, but I will say going out in terms of getting drinks, it's not uncommon, like say for me to go to a random bar or whatever, or like say a speakeasy and get a mixed drink, and it's at least 15 bucks. That's a pretty average price for one regular mixed drink. A beer, you're probably looking at, I don't know, $8-ish. And then things like groceries, I also feel like a pretty standard price. Gas is super expensive. That's one thing I will say. But in terms of living here, in terms of the expenses, I think, I'm gonna be honest, this may be an unpopular opinion here, but I feel like living in LA in terms of the money, and I feel like that's what a lot of people first think about. You wanna come here for music production, you wanna come here to pursue electronic music and become a DJ. I feel like the pricing in terms of, like, say, getting a job and be able to make ends meet, it's about the same as another city. So I'm gonna be honest with you there. Now, getting that out of the way, the biggest thing when it comes to living here in LA, especially for music production, is you really do have to have a car. There is some public transportation here in terms of the subway and in terms of the bus, but being honest, it isn't that good. A lot of the routes are very circuitous. So you have to get used to either A, taking a Lyft and Uber, and that can be really, really tricky because it can get super expensive. A lot of the nightclubs, or the hub of nightclubs here in LA, is in Hollywood or West Hollywood. When I first moved here, I moved to the Valley. It was a little bit cheaper to live in. However, the Uber one way could be, I don't know, the cheapest I could find, it might be like 12 or 15 bucks. So if I go out, I'm already, like, say, at least $30 in the hole from round trip Ubers, right? In terms of me going to the nightclub and coming back. Even if I drove there, finding parking is a nightmare, like any city. However, though, a lot of underground events, like say like warehouse style parties, usually happen in downtown LA. So going from the Valley all the way to downtown can sometimes take you an hour, and then translate that to an Uber cost. So that's why typically there's been some times where I'm like, you know what, I'll just drive. I won't even drink. Obviously, I'm going there to mostly network as well. Like, I'm treating it like work in a sense, where I'll go, I'll have fun, I'll party, but I just won't drink. I'll try to be on my best behavior, blah, 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 blah. So you definitely do need a car. That's one thing I will say. I think especially if you're planning on going out, having a car here is super important. Now, in terms of the music production side of things, this really is the hub of music production. When I first was gonna move from Boston, I had a few different choices. First was New York, right? Because if you think about it, Boston, New York are very close, and similar climates, you know, it's very easy to get to New York. However, I chose LA because one, the weather here is amazing. I hate snow. But two, is that you also have Vegas. Vegas is now kind of like the DJ hub where all the biggest Vegas nightclubs look to get, you know, everyone from Hardwell, Tiesto, Marshmello, all these massive A-list DJs all perform and have residencies in Vegas. And in case you didn't know, Vegas is only roughly about a 4.5-hour drive from LA. So that's a big reason why I suggest for a lot of people to move to LA, because I was actually looking at Miami. At a certain point, it was between LA and Miami, because obviously Miami has a huge music hub, but I am so happy I went with LA simply because you get LA and Vegas in the same move, so to speak. In addition, there are always music production events going on. I mean, I've gone to numerous different album release parties. Like I went to Dylan Francis's album release parties, and they were completely free. I've gone to other unique charity events, like Gesture put on a taco event where we made tacos for everybody, and then everyone performed some Moombahton and world music. It was an amazing event. There's stuff like that going on all the time here in LA. And a lot of times people go back and forth, especially when it comes to music, of, okay, do I have to be at that spot or not? Do I have to be in the location where it's happening or not? If you think about it with acting, for example, you have to act in person. So you really do have to come to LA if you want to be an actor. But with music, well, you can blow up if you're in some remote part of Ohio, for example, right? Like, you make music virtually, or in a sense, you know, not around anybody else. You submit your promos virtually, blah, blah, blah. So do you have to be in LA or not? And my honest answer is this. I think that if you do really want to take music production and DJing seriously, I think you should move to LA. Now, in terms of the cons, the one big thing I will say is it's a lot more cutthroat. There's way more DJs here in LA than compared to almost honestly any other part of the country. I've put together my own tours before. I performed out live at clubs, bars, festivals, everything you can imagine. And I will say, getting gigs here in LA is by far the hardest out of any place I've ever been to. I even had easier times getting gigs when I used to live in Rome and I was a bartender and I networked and I ended up DJing at some venues in Rome. That was actually easier in a completely different country than it is here in LA because it is that cutthroat. However, I will say though, there's always tons of events going on, from Space Yacht, which is an amazing event that always happens at Sound Nightclub, to all the, like I said, the warehouse parties. There's all these unique little underground spots that are always happening. And then in addition, the biggest thing for me, and this is what I love about LA, is the networking. Like I said, I've been to events through me networking here in LA that had Justin Bieber at them, or Kanye West, Skrillex has been at some, Dylan Francis, you know, I could name all these different artists that I have the potential chance to interact with. Now, obviously, some events, it's a lot more tight-knit where it's tough to meet them. Other events are a little bit more relaxed, so it's kind of all over the place. But the biggest thing that I love about LA, and granted, I will say this video could be like a half an hour long where I talk about all the pros and all the cons of LA. I find compared to any other city, LA probably has the biggest pros out of any city while also having some of the biggest cons. And again, this video could be super long, but I'm trying to relate it specifically to music production and DJing. And again, the biggest thing when it comes to LA is the fact that you're gonna be in the hub with all these entertainment events happening all the time, which equals way bigger networking opportunities. And especially in this day and age, it's not just now about making good music. Obviously, that's very important, but if you're not promoting it, if you're not trying to get it out there, if you're not creating demos, putting them on thumbsticks and handing them out, it might not happen. That whole cliche line of the cream rises to the top, meaning if you make good music, eventually it will be heard, isn't necessarily that true anymore. And that's what I think even more so is that now more than ever, is it important to move to that hub of where it's happening. And that's why, being transparent, I think LA is 100% the place you have to be if you want to pursue DJing and electronic music. Especially now, if you think about it, you can communicate with people via your phone or FaceTime, right? So you can do it visually. It's not like before you move out here and you have no money, you don't even know how you're gonna contact your relatives, your loved ones. Especially now in this day and age, it's super easy to keep in touch with everybody, especially in case something goes wrong. So like I said, one, I think LA, as long as you're smart with money, isn't as expensive as it has to be. I'm being honest, like I feel like I could be in any other city and have the same kind of finances or expenses. Two, you definitely need a car, especially getting around, right? If you come here, but you don't go to any music production events, well, what's the point of living here, right? If you don't go to any DJ events, if you don't go to all these different things that are happening all the time in LA, then it doesn't matter, which is why, being honest, I think you do need a car. You can get around through Lyft and Uber, but it might add up pretty quick. And then three, lastly, I gotta say, when it comes to music production, when it comes to all the amazing events that happen here in LA, and a lot of time, like I said, a lot of times they're free. A lot of times, like again, with Dylan Francis's album release parties, or when I was at YouTube Space with Dylan Francis for his Q&A session for his album What, or when I was at Gestures event, or these underground warehouse parties, they're typically always free, and this is huge for networking, huge for promoting yourself as a musician, and huge for getting your name out there.
Ba ba da da ba da ba da ba ba